The rain hammered against our kitchen window like an impatient debt collector as Lena walked through the front door, her heels clicking against the hardwood with that familiar rhythm of someone who owned the world. She dropped her leather briefcase with a theatrical sigh, running manicured fingers through her perfectly styled blonde hair. "God, what a week," she announced to nobody in particular, not bothering to look at me as I stood at the counter, nursing my third cup of coffee. 3 days in Chicago, back-to-back meetings, terrible hotel food. I'm absolutely exhausted. I watched her performance with the detached interest of a man studying a magic trick he'd already figured out. The way she avoided eye contact, the slight tremor in her voice when she mentioned the hotel, the fact that her suitcase looked suspiciously light for a 3-day business trip. "Welcome home, honey," I said, injecting just enough sarcasm to keep things interesting. "I hope the conference was worth it. Learn anything new about corporate law?" Lena finally looked at me, her green eyes flashing with that mixture of guilt and defiance I'd grown to recognize over our 15 years of marriage. "Of course it was worth it, Evan. Some of us are trying to build careers here." There it was, the subtle dig, the reminder that while she climbed the ladder at Morrison, Blake & Associates, I was just a mechanical engineer who fixed things for a living. Never mind that my fixing things had paid for half of everything we owned, including this house in the suburbs with its perfectly manicured lawn and nosy neighbors. "Speaking of building things," I said, gesturing toward the small black device mounted near our front door, "I had Tom install a new security system while you were gone. Motion sensors, cameras, the works. You know how break-ins have been increasing in the neighborhood?" The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. She stared at the camera like it was a venomous snake. "A security system? Don't you think you should have discussed that with me first?" "I tried calling you yesterday, but it went straight to voicemail. Must have been in one of those important meetings." I took another sip of coffee, savoring both the bitter taste and the moment. "Don't worry, it's all very discreet. Motion-activated recording, cloud storage, the whole 9 yards. Tom says it's the same system they use for corporate clients." Lena set her purse down with shaking hands, trying to appear casual. "Well, I suppose it's fine. Though I wish you'd waited. These things can be so invasive." "Invasive?" I raised an eyebrow. "It's our home, Lena. What exactly are you worried about being invaded?" She forced a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Nothing, of course. I just value our privacy, that's all." Privacy. That was rich, coming from someone who'd been sharing intimate details with half her law firm. But I wasn't ready to play that card yet. The game had just begun, and I intended to savor every move. "I'll be in the workshop if you need anything," I said, heading toward the garage. "Got a project I'm working on." The project, of course, was her. For the past month, I'd been putting together pieces of a puzzle that painted a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. Late nights at the office that stretched until midnight, weekend client emergencies that required her immediate attention. The way she guarded her phone like it contained state secrets. Tom Henderson had been my best friend since college, back when we were both young and stupid enough to think the world owed us something. While I'd gone into engineering, he'd become a cop, then left the force to start his own security firm. He specialized in corporate surveillance and had access to technology that would make a spy jealous. "You sure you want to go down this road?" He'd asked me 3 weeks ago when I'd first approached him with my suspicions. We were sitting in his office, surrounded by monitors and equipment that looked like something out of a science fiction movie. "I need to know, Tom. One way or another." He'd studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but once we start pulling threads, the whole sweater might unravel." The first thread had been her phone. Tom had shown me how to clone it, a simple process that took less than 5 minutes when she was in the shower. Suddenly, I had access to every text message, every email, every phone call. The second thread was her credit card statements. Amazing how careless people get when they think nobody's watching. Charges at restaurants I'd never been to, hotels in cities where she claimed to be working alone, purchases at lingerie stores for items I'd never seen. The third thread was the private investigator she didn't know she'd hired. Tom had a contact, a woman named Rebecca, who specialized in matrimonial cases. For $500, she'd followed Lena for a week, documenting her movements with the precision of a scientist studying a lab rat. The photos were everything I'd expected and nothing I'd wanted to see. Lena and Miles Richardson, her senior partner at the firm, sharing intimate dinners at upscale restaurants, holding hands as they walked through downtown, kissing in the parking garage of his luxury apartment building. Miles Richardson, 44 years old, divorced, drives a BMW that costs more than most people's houses, the kind of man who wears $1,000 suits and thinks his Harvard law degree makes him better than everyone else. The kind of man who'd see a middle-class engineer like me as nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. I'd met him exactly twice. Once at the firm's Christmas party, where he'd shaken my hand with the enthusiasm of someone touching a dirty rag. Once at a neighborhood barbecue that Lena had dragged me to, where he'd spent the entire evening making jokes at my expense while she laughed like he was the funniest man alive. Now, as I sat in my workshop surrounded by the tools of my trade, I contemplated the tools I'd need for this particular job. Not wrenches or screwdrivers, but patience, planning, and a willingness to embrace the role they'd cast me in. If they wanted a villain, I'd give them one they'd never forget. My phone buzzed with a text message. Tom had sent me a link to a cloud storage folder labeled Insurance Policy. Inside were dozens of photos, hours of audio recordings, and a video that would make any husband's heart stop. The video was time-stamped from 2 nights ago, the same night Lena claimed to be working late on a brief. It showed her and Miles at Elevation, the trendy rooftop bar downtown, sharing drinks and what could generously be called intimate conversation. The audio was crystal clear, thanks to Tom's high-tech equipment. "This is so risky," Lena's voice whispered through my headphones. "What if Evan finds out?" Miles laughed, the sound dripping with arrogance. "Your husband? Please. The man fixes machines for a living. He's not exactly criminal mastermind material. Still, maybe we should be more careful. He's been asking questions." "Let him ask. What's he going to do? Challenge me to a duel? Face it, Lena, you married beneath yourself. It's time you started acting like it." I replayed that last part 3 times, memorizing every inflection, every casual dismissal of 15 years of marriage. They weren't just having an affair, they were mocking me, treating me like some kind of joke they shared between themselves. The workshop door opened and Lena appeared in the doorway, still wearing her business suit, but looking somehow smaller than she had an hour ago. "What are you doing out here?" she asked, eyeing the laptop on my workbench. "Just catching up on some reading," I said, closing the computer. "You know how it is. Us simple folk need to keep learning if we want to keep up with the smart people." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. She flinched at the subtle barb, but pressed on. "Evan, about the security system. I really think we should discuss major purchases like that before making them." "You mean like how we discussed your new wardrobe? Or those weekend trips to the spa?" I stood up, wiping my hands on a shop rag. "Don't worry about the cost, honey. I got a great deal on the installation. Tom practically did it for free." "That's not what I'm worried about." "Then what are you worried about, Lena? What exactly are you afraid those cameras might see?" For a moment, her mask slipped completely, and I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago, vulnerable, uncertain, human. Then the lawyer took over again, and her expression hardened. "I'm not afraid of anything. I just think we should have boundaries, that's all." "Boundaries," I repeated, tasting the word like wine. "Interesting concept. Maybe we should sit down and discuss what those boundaries should be. You know, make sure we're both on the same page about what's acceptable behavior in a marriage." The color drained from her face again, but she managed to keep her voice steady. Of course. We should definitely talk. Maybe this weekend? Oh, I think we should talk much sooner than that. I moved closer, close enough to smell her perfume. Expensive, unfamiliar, probably a gift from her new boyfriend. In fact, I think we should invite Miles over for dinner, get to know each other better. If I'd slapped her, the reaction couldn't have been more dramatic. She actually stumbled backward, catching herself against the doorframe. Miles? Why would we... he's just a colleague. Just a colleague who apparently has very strong opinions about my intelligence level. I smiled, and something in that expression must have terrified her because she went pale as paper. Don't worry, sweetheart. I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about. She fled then, practically running back to the house, leaving me alone with my tools and my plans. Through the workshop window, I watched her pace back and forth in our kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, probably calling Miles, warning him that her simple-minded husband might be getting suspicious. Let her warn him. Let them both scramble and panic and try to figure out how much I knew. The truth was, I knew everything, and I was just getting started. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Tom. Motion sensors picked up activity at your front door. Someone's been watching your house. I walked to the window and peered through the blinds. Sure enough, Mrs. Fitch from next door was pretending to water her plants while obviously eavesdropping on whatever conversation Lena was having. The old woman had made gossip into an art form, and she had a network of information that would make the CIA jealous. Perfect. In a neighborhood like ours, secrets had a half-life of about 24 hours. If I played this right, I wouldn't have to destroy Lena and Miles myself. I could let the court of public opinion handle the heavy lifting. I opened my laptop again and began typing an email to Tom. Phase 2 is a go. Time to set some traps. The rain had stopped, but the storm was just beginning. Monday morning arrived with the kind of gray, oppressive sky that made everyone in the neighborhood walk a little faster and avoid eye contact. I was already dressed and drinking coffee when Lena stumbled into the kitchen, looking like she'd spent the night wrestling with demons. You're up early, she mumbled, pouring herself coffee with shaking hands. Couldn't sleep, I said truthfully. Kept thinking about our conversation yesterday, about boundaries and trust and all those important marriage things. She nearly dropped her mug. Evan, about that. No need to apologize, honey. You were absolutely right. We should be more open with each other, more honest. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos Tom had sent me. In fact, I was thinking we should start sharing more. Like this great picture I found of you and Miles at that rooftop bar. You both look so happy. I held up the phone, showing her the image of herself laughing at something Miles had whispered in her ear, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. The coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering against the kitchen floor in an explosion of ceramic and liquid. Where did you get that? Her voice was barely a whisper. Does it matter? The important thing is how good you look together. Really, Lena, if I didn't know better, I'd think you two were more than just colleagues. She bent down to clean up the broken mug, probably grateful for an excuse to avoid looking at me. It's not what it looks like. Really? Because it looks like my wife is having dinner with another man while telling me she's working late. But hey, maybe I'm just seeing things. You know how us simple folk can misinterpret sophisticated situations. Evan, please. Please what? Please pretend I didn't see it? Please go back to being the oblivious husband who doesn't ask questions? I knelt down beside her, helping gather the broken pieces. Sorry, sweetheart, but that version of me seems to have malfunctioned. Our hands touched as we both reached for the same shard, and for a moment I saw something that might have been regret in her eyes. Then she pulled away, like I'd burned her. I can explain everything. I'm sure you can. You're a lawyer. Explaining things is what you do for a living. But here's the thing, Lena. I'm an engineer. I deal with facts, not explanations. And the facts are starting to paint a very interesting picture. She stood up, wrapping her arms around herself like she was cold. What do you want from me? I want the truth. All of it. How long has this been going on? How long have you been making a fool of me? It's not like that. Then what is it like? Enlighten me. For a moment, I thought she might actually confess everything. She opened her mouth, took a breath, and I could see her weighing her options. Then the lawyer kicked in again, and she straightened her shoulders. I don't have to justify my professional relationships to you, Evan. If you're going to be jealous and paranoid every time I have a business dinner. Business dinner, I laughed, and the sound was harsh enough to make her flinch. Is that what we're calling it? Well, in that case, I hope the firm has a good expense account policy for intimate business dinners. You're being ridiculous. Am I? Then you won't mind if I call Miles and invite him over for dinner tonight. You know, to discuss business. The panic in her eyes was almost comical. He's very busy. I'm sure he can make time. After all, he seems very interested in our family's affairs. I pulled out my phone again. What's his number? I'll call him right now. Evan, don't. But I was already dialing the main number for Morrison, Blake and Associates. Lena watched in horror as the receptionist answered. Morrison, Blake and Associates, how may I direct your call? Miles Richardson, please. This is Evan Carter, Lena Carter's husband. One moment, please. Lena was shaking her head frantically, making slashing motions across her throat, but I ignored her. The phone rang twice before a familiar, arrogant voice answered. Miles Richardson. Miles, this is Evan Carter, Lena's husband. We met at the Christmas party. A pause. I could practically hear him thinking, trying to figure out why the simple-minded husband was calling him. Oh, yes. Evan, how are you? Fantastic. Thanks for asking. Listen, I was hoping you could join us for dinner tonight. Lena's been talking so much about how hard you two have been working together, and I thought it would be nice to get to know you better. Another pause, longer this time. That's very kind, but I'm afraid I'm quite busy. Come on, Miles. Surely you can spare one evening for your favorite colleague's family. Lena would be so disappointed if you couldn't make it. I looked at Lena as I said this, watching her face cycle through expressions of panic, anger, and desperation. Well, Miles said slowly, I suppose I could rearrange a few things. Excellent. 7 o'clock? I'll cook something special. Hope you like surprises. Yes, 7 o'clock. Should I bring anything? Just yourself and an appetite for honest conversation. See you tonight, Miles. I hung up and smiled at Lena, who looked like she was about to be sick. There, wasn't that easy? Now we can all sit down like civilized adults and discuss your professional relationship. You have no idea what you're doing, she whispered. On the contrary, I know exactly what I'm doing. For the first time in months, I'm thinking clearly. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. I'll be home early to prepare dinner. Make sure you dress nicely. We want to make a good impression on your business partner. I left her standing in the kitchen, surrounded by the broken pieces of her coffee mug and her carefully constructed lies. The drive to work gave me time to think and plan. Tom had sent me a detailed dossier on Miles Richardson, his habits, his weaknesses, his pressure points. The man was arrogant, entitled, and completely unprepared for someone like me to enter his perfectly ordered world. My phone rang as I pulled into the parking lot at Morrison Engineering, the small firm where I'd worked for the past 8 years. The caller ID showed Tom's number. How'd it go? He asked, without preamble. Better than expected. We're having a dinner party tonight. Jesus, Evan. You sure you want to move this fast? They've been playing games with me for months, Tom. Time to change the rules. I parked and sat in my truck, watching my coworkers hurry through the morning drizzle. What else do you have on Richardson? Plenty. Guy's got more skeletons than a medical school. Want me to email you the highlights? Send everything. And Tom? Make sure the security system is recording tonight. I have a feeling we're going to want a permanent record of this conversation. You got it. Just be careful, okay? Men like Richardson don't like being cornered. They tend to bite back. Let him try. I've been underestimated my whole life. It's become my secret weapon. I spent the morning pretending to work while actually researching everything I could find about Miles Richardson. Social media profiles, professional articles, court records from his divorce. The picture that emerged was of a man who'd built his entire identity around being superior to everyone around him. His ex-wife, Jennifer, had taken him to the cleaners in their divorce, citing emotional cruelty and infidelity in the court documents. She'd gotten the house, half his assets, and permanent alimony. According to the records, Miles had tried to hide money in offshore accounts, but Jennifer's lawyers had found everything. Interesting. A man with a history of cheating and financial deception. I wondered if Lena knew about his track record, or if she thought she was special. At lunch, I drove to the grocery store and bought ingredients for what I privately called the Last Supper. Nothing too elaborate. I didn't want Miles to think I was trying too hard. Just a simple meal that would give us plenty of time to talk. Mrs. Fitch was in her front yard when I got home, pruning roses with the dedication of a surgeon. She waved as I carried grocery bags to the front door. Having company tonight, Evan? She called out. Just a friend of Lena's from work, I replied. Miles Richardson. Maybe you know him? Drives the silver BMW? Her eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Mrs. Fitch collected gossip the way some people collected stamps, and she had an encyclopedic knowledge of everyone in a 5-mile radius. Oh, I know Miles. Divorced last year. Very messy from what I heard. His ex-wife got everything. She moved closer to the fence, lowering her voice conspiratorially. There were rumors about other women. Really? Well, I'm sure those were just rumors. He seems like a very professional man. Oh, I'm sure he is, she said, with the kind of smile that suggested she knew exactly what kind of professional he was. Perfect. By tomorrow morning, half the neighborhood would know that Miles Richardson had been at my house for dinner. The other half would know by noon. Lena's car pulled into the driveway as I was seasoning the roast. She sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, staring at the house like it was a prison she was being forced to enter. Finally, she got out and walked to the front door with the enthusiasm of someone approaching the gallows. Smells good in here, she said, hanging up her coat with mechanical precision. Thanks. I thought we'd keep it simple. Nothing too fancy for your business associate. She winced at the emphasis I put on the last two words. Evan, about tonight. What about it? You're not nervous, are you? It's just dinner with a colleague. Of course I'm not nervous. I just think maybe we should establish some ground rules. Ground rules? I looked up from the cutting board where I was chopping vegetables. What kind of ground rules? Just, let's keep the conversation professional. Work topics, current events, that sort of thing. Oh, absolutely. Though I might ask him about his divorce. You know, man-to-man conversation. I'm always curious about how these things work out. The knife she'd been using to slice bread clattered to the counter. His divorce? Sure. It's not a secret, is it? Public record and all that. Mrs. Fitch was telling me all about it this afternoon. Sounds like it was quite the spectacle. Lena's face had gone pale again, but she managed to keep her voice steady. I don't think Miles would appreciate discussing his personal life. Really? He seemed pretty comfortable discussing mine the other night at Elevation. You know, when he was explaining how I'm not exactly criminal mastermind material. She froze, and I knew I'd scored a direct hit. How do I know about your private conversations? Lucky guess. I smiled and went back to chopping vegetables. Don't worry, sweetheart. I'm sure he'll be much more polite in person. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. Miles Richardson was nothing if not punctual. I opened the door to find him standing on my front porch, holding a bottle of wine and wearing the kind of smile politicians use when they're trying to remember your name. Evan, good to see you again. Miles, welcome to our home. Come in, come in. He stepped inside, and I watched him take in the surroundings, the modest furniture, the family photos on the walls, the general air of middle-class respectability. His expression suggested he was slumming it. Something smells wonderful, he said, handing me the wine. Just a simple roast. Nothing too fancy. I examined the bottle. A $200 Bordeaux that probably cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month. This is very generous, Miles. You really didn't need to bring anything. Nonsense. It's the least I could do. Lena appeared in the doorway, wearing a black dress that I'd never seen before. She looked beautiful and terrified, like someone attending her own funeral. Miles, she said, her voice artificially bright. I'm so glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it for the world, he replied, leaning in to kiss her cheek. The gesture lasted just a fraction of a second too long to be purely professional. Well, I said, clapping my hands together. Shall we eat? I'm starving, and I'm sure you two have worked up quite an appetite. Dinner was a masterpiece of subtle psychological warfare. I played the perfect host, asking Miles about his work, his hobbies, his thoughts on various topics. All the while I dropped little hints and observations that let him know I wasn't quite as simple as he'd assumed. So, Miles, I said as I carved the roast, Lena tells me you've been working very closely together lately. Lots of late nights, weekend meetings. You must be handling some important cases. Yes, well, the law is a demanding profession. Not everyone understands the commitment required. Oh, I understand commitment. I've been committed to my marriage for 15 years. I looked directly at him as I said this. Through good times and bad, sickness and health, all that traditional stuff, I'm old-fashioned that way. Miles shifted uncomfortably in his chair. That's admirable, isn't it? Though I suppose not everyone shares those values these days. Take your divorce, for example. Mrs. Fitch was telling me how difficult that must have been for you. The fork froze halfway to his mouth. I'd rather not discuss my personal life if you don't mind. Of course not. I completely understand. Some subjects are too painful to revisit. I turned to Lena. More wine, honey? She nodded, probably hoping the alcohol would numb whatever was coming next. Though I have to say, I continued, refilling her glass, I admire people who can maintain professional relationships even after personal ones have ended. It shows real maturity. I'm sorry? Miles looked confused. Oh, I just meant in general. You know, when workplace relationships don't work out, it can be so awkward for everyone involved. But I'm sure that's never been an issue for you. The color was slowly draining from both their faces as they realized I was playing with them, like a cat with two very nervous mice. Evan, Lena said carefully, maybe we should talk about something else. You're absolutely right. How rude of me to monopolize the conversation. I smiled at Miles. Tell me, what do you think of our new security system? Pretty impressive technology, don't you think? Miles glanced around nervously, as if just noticing the small cameras mounted in the corners of the room. Security system? Oh yes, state-of-the-art. Motion sensors, audio recording, cloud storage, the works. Tom Henderson installed it. You might know him. He does corporate security. The system captures everything that happens in and around the house. Very thorough. That's very thorough, Miles echoed weakly. I think so. You never know when you might need a record of what really happened, you know? Especially these days, when people's memories can be so unreliable. The rest of dinner passed in increasingly uncomfortable silence, broken only by my cheerful commentary on various topics and the occasional nervous response from my guests. By the time I served dessert, both Lena and Miles looked like they wanted to crawl under the table and hide. Well, Miles said finally, checking his watch, this has been lovely, but I should probably get going. Early morning tomorrow. Of course. But before you leave, I wanted to show you something. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the video Tom had sent me. Lena, you'll get a kick out of this too. It's from that new restaurant downtown. Elevation, I think it's called. I pressed play, and the sound of their voices filled the dining room. Miles talking about how I wasn't criminal mastermind material, Lena worrying about getting caught, both of them laughing about how easy it was to deceive the simple-minded husband. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Now, I said, setting down the phone and looking at both of them with the kind of smile a shark might give to a school of fish. Who wants to tell me the truth? The silence stretched out like a taut wire, ready to snap at the slightest touch. Miles stared at my phone as if it were a venomous snake, while Lena had gone so pale I thought she might pass out right there at our dining room table. That's... Miles started, then stopped, apparently unable to find words in his Harvard-educated vocabulary. Illegal, Lena finished, her lawyer instincts kicking in even as her world crumbled around her. Recording private conversations without consent is illegal in this state. I laughed, and the sound seemed to echo off the walls. Illegal? That's your concern right now? Not the fact that you've been lying to me for months, but the legality of how I found out about it? Evan, please, she began. Please what, Lena? Please pretend I didn't hear you two planning how to handle your paranoid husband? Please go back to being the oblivious fool who doesn't ask inconvenient questions? Miles had recovered some of his composure, straightening his tie and putting on what I assumed was his courtroom face. Look, Evan, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? I stood up, and both of them instinctively leaned back in their chairs. Let me see if I understand correctly. You've been having an affair with my wife, mocking me behind my back, and planning God knows what else. Did I misunderstand any of that? It's not an affair, Lena said desperately. We're just friends who hold hands in parking garages? Friends who share intimate dinners while lying to their spouses? Friends who discuss how stupid and harmless the husband is? I walked around the table, and Miles tracked my movement like a man watching a predator circle his camp. You want to know what I think happened here? I continued. I think you two got careless. I think you started believing your own story about how simple and trusting I am. I think you forgot that engineers are trained to solve problems, and you just became a very interesting problem. Evan, Miles said, attempting to sound reasonable, I understand you're upset, but let's not do anything rash. Rash? I laughed again. Miles, I haven't even gotten started yet. This little dinner party? This is me being civilized. This is me giving you both a chance to come clean and maybe salvage something from this mess. What do you want? Lena whispered. I want the truth. All of it. How long has this been going on? What exactly is your relationship? And what were you planning to do about your inconvenient husband? They looked at each other, and I could see an entire conversation happening in that glance. Miles gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head, but Lena's resolve was crumbling. 6 months, she said finally. It's been 6 months. Miles closed his eyes like a man who'd just heard his own sentence. 6 months, I repeated. Our anniversary is next month, Lena. Were you planning to celebrate 15 years of marriage while carrying on with your boyfriend? It wasn't supposed to happen, she said, tears starting to flow. We were working late, and he was going through his divorce, and I was feeling neglected. Neglected? The word came out sharper than I'd intended. I work 50 hours a week to help pay for this house, this lifestyle, your designer clothes and expensive dinners. What exactly was I neglecting? Not financially, she said quickly. Emotionally. We never talk anymore, never do anything together. You're always in that workshop, always working on some project. So you decided to work on a project of your own. Miles finally found his voice again. Evan, I want you to know that I never intended for this to happen. Lena is a remarkable woman, and working with her— Shut up, I said quietly, and something in my tone made him go silent immediately. I wasn't talking to you, Miles. In fact, I think it's time for you to leave. Actually, he said, standing up and smoothing his jacket, I think that's a good idea. Lena, we should discuss this at the office tomorrow. No, I said, moving to block his path to the door. You're not going anywhere until we finish this conversation. Sit down. For a moment, I thought he might try to push past me. Miles was taller than me, probably 20 pounds heavier, and he had the kind of soft arrogance that comes from never being truly challenged. But something in my expression must have convinced him that testing me right now would be a very bad idea. Evan, he said carefully, I think we should all take some time to cool down. I am cool, Miles. Cooler than I've been in months. For the first time in a long time, I'm thinking clearly. I gestured toward his chair. Sit. Down. He sat. Now, I continued, let's talk about what happens next. You see, I've got hours of recordings, dozens of photos, credit card receipts, hotel records, and witness statements. I've got enough evidence to bury both of you in any divorce court in the country. Lena was crying openly now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streams. Evan, please, I know I made a mistake. A mistake? Lena, a mistake is forgetting to pick up milk on the way home. This is betrayal. This is 15 years of marriage thrown away for what? A few exciting nights with your boss? He's not my boss, she said weakly. Senior partner, then. Does the distinction really matter at this point? Miles was looking around the room like a trapped animal, probably calculating his chances of making it to the door. Look, Evan, I understand you're angry, and you have every right to be, but threatening us isn't going to solve anything. Threatening you? I smiled, and both of them flinched. Miles, I haven't threatened anyone. I've simply stated facts. The fact is, I have evidence of your affair. The fact is, this evidence would be very interesting to your clients, your colleagues, and the State Bar Association. His face went white. You wouldn't. Wouldn't I? You spent months treating me like a joke, like some kind of pathetic fool who deserved to be cheated on. Did you really think there would be no consequences? What do you want? He asked, echoing Lena's earlier question. I want you to understand something, Miles. You picked the wrong man's wife to play games with. You see, I may not have a Harvard law degree, but I know how to fix things. And right now, you two have broken something very important to me. I walked back to my chair and sat down, pouring myself another glass of wine like we were having a normal dinner conversation. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. Miles, you're going to transfer to another firm, somewhere far away from here, somewhere far away from my wife. I can't just transfer. Sure you can. I'm sure a man of your talents can find opportunities elsewhere. California, maybe, or New York. I hear the legal market is very competitive there. And if I refuse? I pulled out my phone again and showed him another video, this one of him and Lena in the parking garage of his apartment building, locked in an embrace that was definitely not professional. Then this goes viral, along with copies to every major law firm in the city, the State Bar, and that lovely ex-wife of yours who's already getting alimony. I imagine she'd be very interested to know about your new relationship, especially since it might affect those payments. Miles slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon. You're destroying my career. No, Miles. You destroyed your career the moment you decided to have an affair with a married colleague. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. I turned to Lena, who was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. As for you, my dear wife, we need to have a much longer conversation about the future of our marriage. But that's a private discussion. Evan, she whispered, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake, and I want to make it right. Do you? Because 6 months ago, you might have been able to make it right. 6 months ago, you could have come to me and said you were unhappy, that you needed something different. We could have worked on our marriage, gone to counseling, figured it out together. We still can. No, Lena, we can't. Because 6 months ago, you chose to lie instead of communicate. You chose to sneak around instead of being honest. You chose him over me, over us, over everything we built together. Miles cleared his throat. Perhaps I should leave now. Not yet, I said without looking at him. I want you to hear this, Miles, because it concerns you too. You see, you both made the same mistake. You assumed I was weak, that I would just accept whatever scraps of attention and respect you decided to throw my way. I stood up again, and this time neither of them shrank back. They were too mesmerized by what they were hearing, too shocked by the transformation of the man they thought they knew. But here's the thing about underestimating people, Miles. Sometimes the quiet ones are quiet because they're thinking. Sometimes the patient ones are patient because they're planning. And sometimes the nice guys aren't actually nice at all. They're just waiting for the right moment to show you who they really are. What are you saying? Lena asked. I'm saying that the Evan you married, the Evan you've been lying to and cheating on, that Evan is gone. You two eliminated him as effectively as if you'd put a bullet in his head. What's sitting here now is something different. Something you created with your lies and your betrayal and your casual cruelty. I walked to the window and looked out at the neighborhood where we'd lived for 8 years, where we'd hosted barbecues and block parties, where everyone knew us as the stable couple, the ones who'd made it work. You want to know what happens next? I continued. Miles transfers to another firm, preferably in another state. Lena files for divorce and accepts whatever terms I offer. And both of you pray that I'm feeling generous when I decide how much of this story gets told and to whom. And if we don't agree? Miles asked. I turned back to them, and I could see my reflection in the dark window behind me. A man they no longer recognized. A man who'd been pushed past his breaking point and found something cold and calculating on the other side. Then you find out just how creative a mechanical engineer can be when he sets his mind to solving a problem. And trust me, Miles, you really don't want to become my next project. The dinner party was over. The real game was just beginning. The next morning, I woke up alone. Lena had spent the night in the guest bedroom, and from the sounds I'd heard through the wall, she'd spent most of it on the phone. Probably calling Miles, probably trying to figure out damage control, probably wondering how the simple-minded husband had turned into someone she didn't recognize. I made coffee and checked my email. Tom had sent me an overnight surveillance report that made for interesting reading. Miles had left my house and driven straight to a bar downtown, where he'd proceeded to get thoroughly intoxicated while making phone calls to what Tom's lip-reading expert identified as employment agencies and headhunters. Good. The man was taking my advice seriously. There was also a message from Rebecca, the private investigator. She'd been busy overnight, reaching out to her network of contacts in the legal community. Apparently, rumors about Miles and Lena had been circulating for weeks among the courthouse gossips and paralegal networks. Everyone had suspected something, but no one had been willing to say anything official. That was about to change. Lena emerged from the guest bedroom looking like she'd been hit by a truck. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes were red and swollen, and she was wearing the same clothes from yesterday. She looked at me like I was a stranger who'd broken into her house. "We need to talk," she said. "I thought we talked plenty last night. Very illuminating conversation, don't you think?" She poured herself coffee with shaking hands. "Evan, I know you're angry." "Angry?" I looked up from my laptop. "Lena, angry doesn't begin to cover what I'm feeling right now. Angry is what you feel when someone cuts you off in traffic. This is something entirely different." "Then what is it?" I considered the question seriously. What was I feeling? Not anger exactly, not sadness, though there was some of that. What I felt was a kind of cold clarity, like a fever breaking after a long illness. "Liberated," I said finally. "For months I've been trying to figure out what was wrong with our marriage, what I was doing to make you so distant and unhappy. Turns out, it wasn't me at all. It was just you being a cheater. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Don't call me that. What would you prefer? Adulteress? Unfaithful wife? Woman who's been screwing her boss while lying to her husband? Stop it. Tears were flowing again, but I found I didn't care. The man who would have comforted her, who would have tried to make her feel better, even when she was the one who'd caused the pain, was gone. You know what the worst part is, Lena? It's not even the affair itself. People make mistakes. Marriages have problems. Sometimes these things happen. The worst part is how you handled it. What do you mean? I mean the way you made me feel like I was going crazy. The way you gaslit me every time I asked a question or expressed a concern. The way you turned my love for you into a weapon to use against me. I closed the laptop and looked at her directly. Do you remember 3 months ago when I asked you if everything was okay? You told me I was being paranoid and insecure. You made me feel guilty for even questioning you. I was trying to protect. Protect who? Me? Or yourself? I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at Mrs. Fitch's house. The old woman was already in her garden, probably hoping to catch some drama from our household. You want to know what's really funny? I continued. Miles was right about one thing. I'm not criminal mastermind material. I'm just a guy who fixes things for a living. But you know what? Sometimes fixing something means tearing it apart first to see how badly it's broken. Evan, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through it. Work through it? I turned back to her, and something in my expression made her take a step backward. Lena, there is no working through 6 months of lies and betrayal. There's no counseling session that's going to make me forget what I heard on that recording. It didn't mean anything. It meant everything. The words came out louder than I'd intended, and I saw her jump. It meant that while I was here worrying about our marriage, trying to figure out how to make you happy, you were out there laughing about what a fool I was with another man. My phone buzzed with a text message. Tom was outside and wanted to come in. Perfect timing. We're going to have company, I said, walking to the front door. Tom Henderson looked like he'd been up all night, which he probably had. His security business often required odd hours, and he took his work seriously. He nodded to Lena politely but coolly. Tom had never particularly liked her, and now I understood why. How'd it go last night? He asked. Better than expected. Our friend Miles is apparently looking for new employment opportunities, preferably out of state. Smart man. Tom pulled out a tablet and showed me a series of photographs. Thought you'd want to see these. Richardson left the bar around midnight and went straight to his office. Spent about 2 hours there, probably cleaning out files and personal items. The photos showed Miles loading boxes into his BMW, looking around nervously like he expected someone to jump out of the shadows. He's running scared, Tom observed. Good. He should be. Lena had been listening to our conversation with growing alarm. What are you two planning? Planning? I looked at her with mock innocence. We're not planning anything, honey. We're just documenting the natural consequences of poor decision-making. Tom's tablet buzzed with an incoming message. He glanced at it and grinned. Speak of the devil. Richardson just submitted his resignation to Morrison, Blake & Associates. Effective immediately. Really? That was fast. Gets better. He also put his condo on the market this morning. Looks like he's taking your advice about relocating very seriously. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Phase 1 was complete. Miles Richardson was removing himself from the equation, which simplified things considerably. What about the other matter we discussed? I asked. Already in motion. Should start seeing results by this afternoon. Lena looked back and forth between us, like she was watching a tennis match. What other matter? What results? Tom and I exchanged glances. We'd planned this moment carefully, knowing that the psychological impact would be crucial. Well, I said, settling into my chair like a man about to enjoy a good show, It seems that certain information about your affair has found its way to some very interesting people. What kind of information? What people? Tom consulted his tablet again. Let's see. The managing partners at Morrison, Blake and Associates, received an anonymous email this morning containing photos and audio recordings of their employees engaging in unprofessional conduct. Lena went pale. You didn't. Oh, but we did. And that's not all. The State Bar Association received a complaint about an attorney engaging in behavior that reflects poorly on the profession, complete with documentation, of course. That could ruin my career. Yes, I agreed. It could. Though I notice you're more concerned about your career than about our marriage. Interesting priorities, Lena. She sank into a chair, looking defeated. Why are you doing this to me? I'm not doing anything to you. I'm simply making sure that the truth comes to light. You and Miles made choices, and now you get to live with the consequences of those choices. Tom's tablet buzzed again. Oh, this is good. Jennifer Richardson, Miles's ex-wife, just filed a motion to increase her alimony payments. Seems she has new evidence that her ex-husband has been engaging in behavior that violates their divorce agreement. How is that possible? Lena asked. Well, I said, adultery clauses are pretty common in divorce settlements, especially when one party has a history of infidelity. Miles's ex-wife is a smart woman. She made sure to include provisions that would protect her if he started cheating again. But he wasn't cheating on her. We're not married. Tom and I looked at each other and burst out laughing. Lena, I said when I could speak again, you're a lawyer. Surely you understand that adultery doesn't just mean cheating on your current spouse. It means engaging in conduct with someone who is married to someone else. The color drained from her face as the implications hit her. Oh, God. Indeed. So Miles's little affair with you is going to cost him a lot more than just his job. Jennifer's lawyers are very good, and they're very motivated. I suspect Miles is going to be paying significantly more alimony for the foreseeable future. My phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but Tom nodded. It was one of his contacts. Evan Carter, I answered. Mr. Carter, this is Patricia Wells from Morrison, Blake and Associates. I'm the managing partner. I believe we need to discuss a situation involving your wife and one of our former employees. Former employee? Miles Richardson submitted his resignation this morning. Given the circumstances, we felt it was best to accept it immediately. I see. And what circumstances would those be? I think it would be better if we discussed this in person. Would you be available to come in this afternoon? I looked at Lena, who was staring at me with a mixture of horror and fascination. I'll be there at 2:00, I said. Excellent. And Mr. Carter? You might want to bring a lawyer. After I hung up, the kitchen was silent, except for the sound of Lena's ragged breathing. They're going to fire me, she whispered. Probably, I agreed, though I suspect they'll give you the option to resign first, more dignified that way. 15 years, she said, more to herself than to me. 15 years of building my career, and it's all gone. 15 years of marriage, I countered. And you threw that away for 6 months of excitement with your boss. Tom gathered up his tablet and stood to leave. I'll keep monitoring the situation. Let me know if you need anything else. Thanks, Tom, for everything. After he left, Lena and I sat in our kitchen in silence. The same kitchen where we'd shared thousands of meals, where we'd planned our future, where we'd laughed and argued and lived our lives together. Now it felt like a crime scene. What happens now? She asked finally. Now you call a lawyer, a good one, because you're going to need it, and not someone from your firm. They're going to be dealing with their own problems. I mean with us, with our marriage. I looked at her, really looked at her, for what I realized might be the last time. She was still beautiful, still the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But something fundamental had changed, something that couldn't be repaired or forgiven. There is no us, Lena. There's no marriage. You made sure of that when you chose to betray everything we built together. But I love you. No, I said quietly. You love the security I provided. You love the comfortable life we built. You love having someone to come home to when your exciting affair gets complicated. But you don't love me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have been able to do what you did. She started crying again, but this time I didn't feel the urge to comfort her. The man who would have done that was gone, replaced by someone harder, colder, more practical. I'll be staying at Tom's place for a few days, I said, standing up. You should use that time to find somewhere else to live. And Lena, don't try to take anything that isn't yours. I have a very detailed inventory of everything in this house. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. You're a smart, successful lawyer. I'm sure you'll figure something out. I walked upstairs and packed a bag, listening to her cry in the kitchen below. Part of me, a small part, felt sorry for her. But that part was overwhelmed by a much larger part that felt nothing but cold satisfaction. She'd made her choices. Now she got to live with them. As I carried my bag to the truck, Mrs. Fitch appeared at her fence with the timing of a woman who'd been watching from behind her curtains. Everything all right, Evan? She asked with false concern. Just fine, Mrs. Fitch, though I suspect you'll have some interesting gossip to share with the neighborhood over the next few days. Her eyes lit up like I'd just handed her a winning lottery ticket. Oh? Let's just say that appearances can be deceiving. Sometimes the people you think you know best are the ones with the most secrets. I climbed into my truck and drove away, leaving Lena alone in the house we'd shared, surrounded by the wreckage of the life she'd destroyed. The game was far from over. In fact, it was just getting interesting. 3 days later, I sat in Tom's office reviewing what he called the aftermath report. It read like a case study in how quickly a carefully constructed life can collapse when the foundation is revealed to be rotten. Miles Richardson had indeed fled the city, accepting a position with a small firm in Phoenix that was apparently desperate enough to hire someone with his sudden availability. According to Tom's contacts, he'd taken a 60% pay cut and would be starting over as a junior associate. His ex-wife's lawyers had been swift and merciless. His alimony payments had tripled, and they'd frozen several of his assets pending a full investigation of his finances. Guy's basically broke, Tom observed, scrolling through financial records that his investigator friends had compiled. The divorce already cleaned him out, and now, with the increased payments and legal fees, he's looking at bankruptcy within 6 months. Couldn't happen to a nicer person, I said, though I felt no particular satisfaction in his downfall. Miles had been a symptom, not the disease itself. What about Lena? Tom asked. That was a more complicated story. Morrison, Blake & Associates had indeed given her the option to resign rather than be fired, which she'd taken. The State Bar Association was conducting an investigation that would likely result in a formal reprimand, but not disbarment. Adultery wasn't technically a crime, just a serious breach of professional ethics when it involved workplace relationships. She's staying at her mother's house in Riverside, I said, reading from my own notes. Apparently, her mother is not taking the news well. Can't say I'm surprised. Margaret always thought Lena married beneath herself. That was true. Lena's mother had made no secret of her disappointment when her daughter chose to marry a blue-collar engineer instead of another lawyer or doctor. The irony that Lena's attempt to upgrade had actually destroyed her life wasn't lost on me. My phone buzzed with a call from Patricia Wells, the managing partner at Morrison, Blake & Associates. We'd met twice since the initial phone call, and she'd proven to be a sharp, no-nonsense woman who was primarily concerned with protecting her firm's reputation. Mr. Carter, she said when I answered, I wanted to give you an update on our internal investigation. I'm listening. We've completed our review of the Richardson-Carter situation. While we found evidence of inappropriate conduct, we've determined that no firm resources were misused and no client confidentiality was breached. That's good to hear. However, we are implementing new policies regarding workplace relationships and professional conduct. We're also offering you a settlement agreement that we believe is fair compensation for the disruption this situation has caused. I'd been expecting this. Law firms lived in terror of scandal, and they were willing to pay significant amounts to make potential problems disappear. What kind of settlement are we talking about? $50,000, plus a confidentiality agreement. In exchange, you agree not to pursue any legal action against the firm or discuss this matter publicly. It was a generous offer, more money than I made in a year. But it wasn't really about the money anymore. I'll need to think about it, I said. Of course, take your time. After I hung up, Tom looked at me curiously. You're not going to take it? I don't know yet. $50,000 would be nice, but signing a confidentiality agreement means I can't tell my side of the story if Lena tries to rewrite history later. Fair point. What's your lawyer say? I'd hired Jennifer Martinez, one of the best divorce attorneys in the city. She was expensive, but Tom had convinced me that this wasn't the time to cut corners. Jennifer was known for her aggressive tactics and her ability to protect her clients' interests, even in the messiest situations. She thinks I should take the settlement but negotiate the confidentiality terms. Maybe limit it to just the firm's involvement, not the affair itself. Smart woman. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Lena. We need to talk. Please. I showed the message to Tom, who shook his head. Don't do it, man. Nothing good can come from that conversation. I know, but part of me is curious about what she wants to say. She wants to manipulate you. Same thing she's been doing for months, just more desperately now. He was probably right, but I found myself typing back, 1 conversation, public place, 1 hour. Her response came immediately. Coffee shop on Main Street, 3 p.m. today. Thank you. You're making a mistake, Tom warned. Maybe, but I need to hear what she has to say. For my own closure, if nothing else. The coffee shop was neutral territory, busy enough that Lena couldn't make a scene, public enough that I wouldn't be tempted to say anything I'd regret later. I arrived early and chose a table near the back, where we could talk without being overheard, but where I could still see the entire room. Lena arrived exactly on time, which didn't surprise me. Punctuality had always been one of her few reliable traits. She looked terrible. Thin, pale, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, a far cry from her usual professional attire. Thank you for meeting me, she said, sitting down across from me. You said we needed to talk, so talk. She fidgeted with her coffee cup, avoiding eye contact. I wanted to apologize, really apologize, not the half-hearted attempts I made before. Okay, I'm listening. I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you in ways that can't be fixed. I know I destroyed our marriage and probably destroyed any chance of us being friends or even civil to each other. I waited for more, but she seemed to be struggling to find the words. Is that it? I asked finally. No, there's more. I wanted to explain, not to excuse what I did, but to help you understand why it happened. I'm not sure I need to understand, Lena. You had an affair. You lied about it. You made me feel crazy for suspecting the truth. The why doesn't really matter at this point. It matters to me. She looked up, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. I need you to know that it wasn't because I stopped loving you. Then why? Because I felt invisible. Because we'd fallen into this routine where we barely talked to each other except about practical things. Because I felt like we were roommates instead of husband and wife. I considered this, trying to be fair despite everything that had happened. So you decided to have an affair instead of talking to me about it. I didn't decide to have an affair. It just happened. Miles was going through his divorce, and he was vulnerable, and I was lonely, and one night after working late we went for drinks, and you made a choice. Every time you met him, every time you lied to me, every time you came home and pretended everything was normal, you made a choice. She nodded miserably. You're right. I made terrible choices, and I have to live with the consequences. Yes, you do. We both do. Evan, is there any chance, any possibility at all, that we could try to work through this? I know it would take time and counseling, and I'd have to earn your trust back, but… No. The word came out harder than I'd intended, and she flinched as if I'd hit her. There's no working through this, Lena. There's no earning my trust back. You didn't just cheat on me, you systematically lied to me for 6 months. You made me doubt my own perceptions. You turned our marriage into a performance where you played the role of the faithful wife while planning your next rendezvous with your lover. I know, but nothing. You want to know why there's no going back? It's not just the affair itself. It's the recording I heard of you and Miles laughing about how stupid I was. It's the casual cruelty of discussing your marriage problems with the man you were cheating with. It's the complete lack of respect you showed for me, for us, for everything we built together. She was crying openly now, but I felt nothing. The man who would have comforted her, who would have tried to make her feel better, was gone. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't give me back the months I spent wondering what was wrong with me, why my wife was pulling away. Sorry doesn't erase the humiliation of finding out that everyone at your office knew about your affair before I did. What can I do? There has to be something I can do to make this right. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married, the woman I'd loved for 15 years. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize, someone who'd proven she was capable of betrayal and deception. You can sign the divorce papers without fighting them, I said finally. You can accept the settlement my lawyer offers. You can move on with your life and let me move on with mine. That's it? 15 years of marriage and that's it? You ended our marriage 6 months ago, Lena. I'm just making it official. I stood up to leave, but she grabbed my arm. Evan, please. I love you. I know I have a terrible way of showing it, but I do love you. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. If this is how you show love, Lena, then I don't want to be loved by you. I pulled free and walked away, leaving her crying in the coffee shop. As I reached the door, I heard her call my name, but I didn't turn around. Outside, the afternoon sun was shining, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. The weight I'd been carrying, the doubt, the confusion, the desperate hope that somehow everything would work out, was finally gone. Tom was waiting in his truck across the street. He'd insisted on keeping an eye on the meeting, just in case Lena tried anything desperate. How'd it go? He asked as I climbed into the passenger seat. About like you'd expect. She apologized, tried to explain, asked if there was any chance of reconciliation. And I told her the truth. There isn't. Tom nodded approvingly. Good man. She made her choice. Now she gets to live with it. The funny thing is, I think she actually believes she can fix this. Like if she just apologizes enough, or explains her motivations clearly enough, I'll suddenly forgive her and we can go back to the way things were. That's what manipulative people do. They think everyone else operates the same way they do, that everything is negotiable, that there are no real consequences for their actions. We drove in silence for a while, both lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Tom spoke again. So what's next? Next, I start over. New house, new life, new everything. The old Evan is gone, and it's time to figure out who the new one is going to be. Any ideas? I thought about it as we pulled into Tom's driveway. For months, I'd been trying to save a marriage that was already over, trying to be the man Lena wanted me to be. Now, for the first time in years, I could be whoever I wanted to be. Yeah, I said finally, I think I do. The game was over. Lena had lost, Miles had lost, and I had won. Not because I'd destroyed them, but because I'd finally seen them clearly. The lies were gone, the deception was over, and the truth had set me free. Now it was time to build something new from the wreckage of what they'd destroyed. And this time, I'd be building it for me. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my new house, a modest place on the other side of town, far from the suburban neighborhood where Lena and I had played out the final act of our marriage. The house was smaller, simpler, but it was mine in a way the old house had never been. Tom knocked on the back door and let himself in, carrying 2 bottles of beer and a folder full of papers. "Thought you'd want to see the final report," he said, handing me one of the beers. I opened the folder and scanned the contents. Miles Richardson had indeed filed for bankruptcy, just as Tom had predicted. His legal career was effectively over. The Phoenix firm had let him go after 3 months, citing performance issues that everyone understood meant he couldn't handle the pressure of starting over at the bottom. Lena had found work with a small family law practice in Riverside, taking a significant pay cut but managing to rebuild some semblance of a career. Her mother's house had been sold to pay for her legal fees, and the 2 of them were sharing a small apartment while they figured out their next steps. She tried to contest the divorce settlement, Tom noted, pointing to one of the documents. Her lawyer withdrew the motion after your lawyer presented the evidence. Smart move. Jennifer doesn't mess around. Speaking of which, how'd the final hearing go? Exactly as expected. Judge signed the papers, made it official. 15 years of marriage dissolved in about 10 minutes. I felt nothing as I said it. No sadness, no relief, just a kind of neutral acceptance. The man who'd been married to Lena Carter felt like someone I'd known a long time ago, in a different life. Any regrets? Tom asked. I considered the question seriously. About the marriage ending? No. About how it ended? Sometimes. I think there might have been a way to handle it that didn't destroy so many lives. You didn't destroy anything, Evan. They did that themselves. You just made sure everyone could see the wreckage clearly. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. When I opened it, I saw it was from Lena. I heard about your promotion. Congratulations. You deserve it. Morrison Engineering had indeed promoted me to senior partner, partly because of my work, but mostly because the publicity from the affair scandal had actually brought in new clients. Apparently, there was something appealing about hiring the wronged husband who'd handled his situation with such calculated precision. I showed the text to Tom, who shook his head. She's still trying to maintain some kind of connection. Probably, but it doesn't matter anymore. I deleted the message without responding and put the phone away. Lena Carter was part of my past now, a chapter in a book I'd finished reading. So what's next? Tom asked. You've got the house, the career, the fresh start. What do you do with all that freedom? I'm thinking about taking a vacation. Maybe Europe. I've never been anywhere outside the country. Sounds good. You've earned it. We finished our beers in comfortable silence, 2 old friends who'd weathered a storm together and come out stronger on the other side. Through the kitchen window, I could see my new neighbors working in their garden, a young couple with a baby, full of hope and plans for the future. Once upon a time, that had been Lena and me. Young, optimistic, certain that love was enough to overcome any obstacle. We'd been wrong about that, but we'd been right about one thing. Love was powerful. Powerful enough to build something beautiful, and powerful enough to destroy it when it was betrayed. The old Evan would have spent hours analyzing what went wrong, trying to figure out how to prevent it from happening again. But the new Evan understood something the old one hadn't. Sometimes things break not because they're defective, but because they're put under stresses they weren't designed to handle. My marriage to Lena had been built on assumptions that turned out to be false. We'd assumed we wanted the same things, valued the same principles, would remain the same people we'd been when we first fell in love. When those assumptions proved wrong, the structure couldn't hold. But that was okay. Not everything was meant to last forever, and not every ending was a failure. Sometimes destruction was just the first step in building something better. I raised my beer bottle in a silent toast to the man I used to be, the marriage that used to exist, and the life that used to seem so important. Then I finished the beer, threw the bottle in the recycling bin, and started planning my trip to Europe. The game was over, the players had left the field, and it was time to start a new game entirely. This time, I'd be playing by my own rules. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. It was the end of one day and the promise of another. And for the first time in a very long time, I was looking forward to seeing what tomorrow would bring. The security system in my new house was state-of-the-art, but I wasn't worried about intruders anymore. The real threats had already been identified and neutralized. Now all I had to do was live with the consequences of my choices, just like everyone else, and I was perfectly fine with that.